Hi, my name is Issy and thank you for clicking on this video. I've made this short video for the Royal Voluntary Service First Time for Everything initiative, which is designed to create a sort of virtual village hall for this sort of strange lockdown phase to make sure that we aren't missing out on the things that normally bring us together. If anyone has missed out on their book club, I'm hoping that this video will serve as a sort of literature-based inspiration. A little bit about me. I'm a professional athlete on the British Paralympic team, but I'm also studying for my Masters in Literature at the University of Exeter. Lockdown has given some of us a lot of time, a lot of spare time, to tackle that sort of stack of books that we all have of unread books to get around to. And I'm just going to share with you a few that I've enjoyed most during lockdown, so that if you've gotten through that stack of books, then hopefully this will serve as inspiration for what to read next. And I'm hoping that the samples I've got will interest you. I've tried to get something for everyone. So we have modern history fiction, fiction in diary, sorry, not fiction, a diary form. We have a short story collection, present day fiction, and then a novel that is probably the grittiest novel I've read in a long time. If you're up for something challenging and you like to really get your teeth into some gritty fiction, then that one's for you. So we'll start with modern history fiction. This is The After Party by Anton de Stefani. It's set in 1950s Texas, and it follows the story particularly of two young ladies who grew up together in very high society Houston. It follows the lifestyle and the expectations of those with a lot of money. It follows the choices of different people. So the choice of young ladies and women between marriage and children, and those that try and break the mold. So those that chase something different. They want to break out of the boundaries that are expected of them, and those that their parents and grandparents and those before have all sort of gone through the same process of living. I love this book. For a book of over 300 pages, it flowed beautifully from start to finish, which I think all of us will agree is something quite rare in a book of this length. The writing is very lyrical. It's simple, but it's minimalist, and it flows from one phase to the next to the next. It does move back in time and forward in time as the narrator comments on things that have happened in her past and things that are happening in her future, and how the two are connected. And if anyone in this sort of lockdown phase is either reminiscing or planning for the future, that sort of movement from past to present to future is definitely poignant in this book. So if anyone's looking for a really hearty, interesting piece of fiction, very heartwarming fiction, and warm too because it's set in Houston and they constantly mention the heat, which I'm sure we're all loving in Britain right now, then that is The After Party by Anton de Stefani. The second book that I've got to review today is in diary form, and it is the Laugh Out Loud Diary of a Bookseller by Shaun Bythell. This diary was an absolute joy to read, and if anybody likes diary form, then absolutely buy this book. If you're not acquainted with diary form, I would start here. Shaun Bythell lives in Wigtown in Scotland, which is a small town which grew largely because of a literature festival that was held there every year and still is. And this book is written over 1 year, and it gives so much insight into the modern industry of bookselling, second-hand bookselling, of people that consider themselves bookish and then the really bookish, what people enter a second-hand bookshop expecting and perhaps the reality. The writer, his humour is so dry, it makes you laugh out loud, so maybe don't read this in a public place. If you if you've read a lot, if you're, really into your literature, there are just dotted throughout are constant references to the classics, to non-fiction and fiction. You can pick up a lot of book recommendations just from reading this book alone, and it will really make you want to visit Scotland and Wigtown. And I'm really hoping that the sequel to this, which is coming out, I believe, later this year, is just as good, because The Diary of a Bookseller by Sean Bythell is guaranteed to bring a smile to your face. Okay, so the third book that I've got for you today is a short story collection. And for lovers of literature, those two words, short stories, everyone seems to reject short stories. It sends them into a bit of a panic. Don't panic, give it a chance. This book is called Turbulence by David Cesale. It's Cesale's second book. His first book, All That Man Is a collection of longer short stories that all link very, very lightly, very minimally, in a way that you only sort of see at the end. This book is short, for short stories, and in this sort of lockdown time where we're wondering how sort of places are connected and people are connected, this is a really, really significant book. It begins with a mother in London who's visiting her son, and each person that the story moves on to is connected by a flight. So the mother then flies back to her home in Spain, and then the story takes off from Spain, and then the next person will take a flight, and the next, until in the last story it loops back round to London. So you see how all these people all around the world are connected by people they know, and all of them go through certain existential questions, whether that be about happiness and family, sexuality, anxiety or depression, anything. All sort of human emotions are explored through the book, and the sort of snippets into people's lives are connected via flights, which is obviously very sort of contemporary in our time, where currently travel is restricted, and we can understand the sort of detrimental effects that that's going to have on families and loved ones who are far away. So do not fear the short story. David Cesale's Turbulence, fantastic sort of taster, sample if you like, of short stories that are interconnected. The fourth book I've got for you today is the best book I've read in the last 2 or 3 years. This is called Old Buildings in North Texas by Jen Waldo, and don't worry, it's not about old buildings in North Texas. This book is about a recovering cocaine addict who turns to urbexing as a form of rehabilitation, as a hobby. She's in her mid-30s, and after a cocaine-induced heart attack, the main character, Olivia, is sent home to undergo rehabilitation under the watchful eye of her mother. And this relationship between mother and daughter in sort of mid-30s, when a daughter perhaps isn't expected to live at home, is absolutely hilarious. The author, Jen Waldo, deals with some potentially quite sensitive subjects, such as obviously addiction and substance abuse. She deals with, without wanting to give too much of the plot away, family relationships and ties. She deals with debt and violence with very sensitive humour. It's tasteful humour, and it will have you laughing from start to finish. And yet it also highlights things in society that perhaps we don't notice straight away. So the role that material objects play in our lives, for example, the priority that we place on things that aren't important in the bigger picture. If anyone hasn't heard of urbexing is going to explore abandoned properties or buildings or sites and leaving no trace of being there. So going there to immerse yourself in the past, in the potential of what could have happened there, and then learning about the history of the place, the previous owners, things like that. But the protagonist in this, Olivia, takes that one step further. And I will leave you to read the book because it is fantastic. Jen Walder also has a second book called Why Stuff Matters, which deals again with material objects in people's lives, second-hand selling and buying. But as a good place to start, Old Buildings in North Texas, not about old buildings in North Texas, is my absolute best book I've read in the last, I would say, 2 years. The last book I've got for you today as a recommendation is something gritty. Gritty is the word. This book is called Time's Arrow, and it's written by Martin Amis. The book, unlike anything else I've ever read, starts at the end of his life and moves toward his birth. The book is told from the point of view of the protagonist's consciousness, which is it's a strange concept to get your head around once you've spent weeks reading American fiction and short stories. This book is not for the light-hearted, not for the faint-hearted. It says it on the blurb, so I won't be ruining the plot for you when I tell you that it deals with some very gruesome themes. The protagonist is a doctor in Auschwitz, and throughout his life, which moved backwards, which is difficult to read, it's a difficult reading style. Throughout his life, he contemplates the acts that he performed during his time working for the Nazis in Auschwitz in World War II, and how that has affected his life, his relationships, and his safety moving forward from that. It explores the human psyche in a way that I've not read another book that does quite the same. The perspective of the consciousness which is narrating the book, believe me, it's it's interesting. The perspective of the consciousness that narrates the book gives a very original sense of understanding of how we might judge someone differently if we know only the current facts about that person, and how our perception of a person differs when we know their past, or how deeply we know a person. How does that affect the way we think about them? So, for example, at the start of the book, when he's old, you wonder what the problem is, why he's being sent strange letters, and why he's being checked up on, and why he's moving, and all these things. And you do find out early on that obviously he's had a number of name changes throughout his life. And you wonder why that's so worrying, why that's so concerning. And you start to like the character, of course. But as you move backwards in time, obviously towards his sort of crimes, if you will, you wonder how you can have come to have liked this character based on the things he's done in history. It's a really interesting take on how we treat people and how we perceive people based on their past and based on their actions. It is not for the faint-hearted. I will repeat that. It is not for the faint-hearted. But if anyone is looking for a real challenge, then I would recommend Time's Arrow by Martin Amis. You will find yourself reading certain sections back because it's written back to front, including conversations, including all sort of life activities like eating, writing. He's a doctor, so performing operations. You will find yourself second-guessing what you've just read. So if anyone's looking for something really meaty to try and get your head around, then I recommend this. I do hope that you have found something of interest in the recommendations I've made. If not, then I recommend this. This is The Novel Cure, and it's a reference book written by Ella Berthold and Susan Elderkin, and it suggests books, fiction and non-fiction, to those life situations in which we find ourselves. So it's kind of like a dictionary, if you like. You can turn to the back and you might find, in A, anxiety, which I'm sure we're all experiencing at this period in time. You turn to A, anxiety, and this book recommends The Portrait of a Lady by Henry James. But any sort of period of life, feeling, emotion, this book has it all. So if nothing today that I've recommended to you sounds like it's quite your cup of tea, then do turn to The Novel Cure, an A to Z of literary remedies, for your next book. I do hope that you've enjoyed this video. I've enjoyed making it, and I hope that everyone is very well in lockdown, and that as soon as we get out of here we can all rejoin the book clubs and societies we were working with before, and share what we've read and enjoyed in lockdown. Enjoy your lockdown literature. I've been Izzy Bailey. Thanks for watching.